The little church door slammed so hard against the wall that dust shook loose from the rafters, and every head turned toward Clara Whitmore. She stood at the front of the aisle in a faded wedding dress pulled tight across her heavy body, both hands trembling around a wilted bouquet. Before Reverend Cole could open his Bible, before Ethan Walker could take her hand, Clara forced out the truth that had ruined every promise ever made to her. "I can't give you children." The words fell across the church like a dropped plate. Somewhere behind her, a woman gasped. A man near the back coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. Abigail Price, seated in the second pew, with her gloved hands folded neat, as prayer lowered her eyes and smiled, as though she had been waiting for Clara to hang herself with her own confession. Clara did not look at any of them. She looked only at Ethan Walker, the widowed rancher standing before her in his black coat, his sun-browned face still and unreadable. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and rough from years of cattle work, with hands that looked more suited to rope and fence wire than wedding vows. He had 3 children of his own, folks said, and half a dozen other lost creatures under his roof besides, and Clara had nothing to offer him that the town considered worth wanting. If you had been standing in that church, you might have heard how quiet cruelty can be. It does not always shout. Sometimes it sits in polished shoes and Sunday gloves, waiting for a broken woman to say she is not enough. Reverend Cole shifted his weight. "Mr. Walker," he said carefully, "no man would fault you for reconsidering." That was when Clara's heart seemed to stop. She knew what came next. She had lived it before. A man's face cooling, a promise withdrawn, a family whispering that she was too large, too barren, too much trouble for too little reward. She lowered her head, ready for Ethan to step away. But Ethan did not move back. He looked down at her trembling hands, then at the body the whole town had measured and mocked since she was a girl. Then he reached out, steady as a fence post in hard wind, and took her bouquet from her before the flowers fell. "You don't have to give me children, Clara," he said. The church held its breath. Ethan's mouth lifted not with pity, but with something quieter and stronger. "I've already got a whole herd. What I need is someone who won't run when they all start crying at once." No one laughed then. Not Reverend Cole. Not the men by the door. Not Abigail Price, whose smile thinned sharp as a blade. Clara stared at him as if kindness had spoken in a language she had forgotten. She wanted to believe him. Lord help her, she did. But a woman taught long enough that she is unwanted does not trust mercy the first time it reaches for her. Ethan offered his arm. After a long moment, Clara placed her hand on it. Outside, the red dust street waited under a hard noon sun. Beyond the church windows stood the wagon that would carry her to the Walker Ranch, to 3 grieving children, 2 orphans, a silent little boy left at a church door, and a house full of chores, animals, hunger noise, and old sorrow. Clara did not know it yet, but the real test would not be whether Ethan could keep his vow. It would be whether she could survive the family that came with it. As Reverend Cole began the ceremony, Abigail Price leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered, "He'll regret this before winter." The ride out of town felt longer than the road itself. Clara sat beside Ethan on the wagon bench with her wedding bouquet in her lap, the petals already wilting from heat and handling. Behind them, the church bell gave one tired ring, then stopped. She did not turn to look back. She knew what she would see if she did. Faces gathered at windows, mouths already moving. Women pretending pity, men pretending wisdom, Abigail Price pretending nothing at all. Ethan held the reins in silence. He did not try to comfort Clara with fancy words. He did not tell her not to mind them. Men often said that when they had never been the one Wade judged and found lacking in every room they entered. Instead, he let the horses carry them past, the mercantile, past the livery, past Reverend Cole, standing at the church steps with his Bible pressed against his chest like he had just watched a bad bargain close. Only when the town had shrunk behind them did Ethan speak. They talk because it cost them less than work. Clara looked over, unsure whether he meant it kindly or merely as fact. He kept his eyes on the road. "You hungry?" It was such a plain question that it nearly broke her. Not because it was tender, but because it expected her to keep living after humiliation. Clara swallowed and shook her head, though her stomach had been empty since dawn. Ethan glanced at her once. "You will be." The Walker Ranch appeared near sundown, set low against the wide grassland like something built by stubborn hands and held together by prayer. The barn leaned a little. The fence sagged in 3 places. A chicken stood on the porch rail as if it owned the house. 2 dogs came running, one limping, one barking hard enough for both. From somewhere near the wash line, a child yelled, "Ben's got the flour sack." Before Ethan could answer, the front door flew open and a small boy shot out, covered almost head to toe in white flour. A goat followed him. Behind the goat came a red-faced girl of about 10, carrying a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Samuel said I had to stop him," she shouted. "I told you to stop the goat," a boy yelled from the barn. The wagon had not yet stopped when something crashed inside the house. Clara stared. This then was the whole herd. Ethan set the brake with the slow patience of a man who had seen worse before breakfast. "I warned you." A tiny laugh escaped Clara before she could catch it. It came out nervous and cracked, but it was a laugh all the same. Ethan looked at her then, and for the first time since the church, something eased in his face. The easing did not last. The older boy, Samuel, came around the barn with a coil of rope in one hand and suspicion in both eyes. At 12, he already stood like a man expecting trouble. His gaze moved over Clara's body, her dress, her tired face, and the bouquet in her lap. He did not smile. "So that's her," he said. Ethan's voice lowered. "Mind your tongue." Samuel looked away, but not in shame, in anger. A thin girl with brown hair stood half hidden behind the doorframe. Lily, Clara guessed. 9 years old, maybe, with watchful eyes that looked too old for her small face. She clutched a framed photograph to her chest so tightly, her knuckles paled. Beside her, little Ben, still dusted in flour, peered around the railing with open curiosity until Samuel snapped, "Get back." Ben obeyed at once. Clara climbed down carefully, feeling the pull of the dress at her waist and the heavy ache in her knees after the long ride. Nobody stepped forward to help except Ethan, and even his hand paused, as though he was not used to offering such things. She took it anyway. His palm was rough, warm, and steady. Inside the house smelled of smoke, sour milk, and beans burned black at the bottom of a pot. Laundry lay in a basket. A little boy of 4 sat under the table silent as a fence shadow, holding a wooden horse with one broken leg. Near the stove, a baby goat nosed at a sack of meal. On the mantel sat a woman's photograph in a plain frame, its glass kept cleaner than anything else in the room. Clara saw Lily's eyes flick to it. "I won't move that," Clara said softly. The girl stiffened, surprised that Clara had noticed. "It ain't yours to move." "No," Clara said. "It isn't." That was all. She did not explain. She did not ask to be liked. She set her bouquet on the table, rolled up her sleeves, and took the burned pot from the stove. Ethan watched her. "You don't have to start tonight." Clara scraped the bottom of the pot with a wooden spoon. "If I wait for a quiet day." "Mr. Walker, I suspect I'll die first." Maggie, the spoon-wielding orphan, gave a sudden snort. Ben smiled before Samuel's glare wiped it away. Clara found cornmeal, beans, onions, and a heel of bacon wrapped in cloth. She moved slowly, but with purpose. Her body had always made people assume she was lazy. Let them. She had learned years ago that steady hands could outlast cruel eyes. She stirred a fresh pot, cut the burn taste with onion, set water to boil, and handed Ben a damp rag without scolding him for the flour. He looked at it, then at her. For me, for the parts of you that used to be boy. Maggie laughed, this time quick and bright. Samuel did not. When supper was ready, Clara placed the bowls on the table. She gave the largest portion to Samuel without a word, the softest piece of bacon to Lily, and broke bread into small bits for Tommy under the table. The little boy did not come out, but his hand reached from the shadows and took one piece. Clara pretended not to see. Some frightened creatures came closer when no one watched them do it. Ethan stood near the door with his hat in his hands, looking at the table as if he had wandered into a memory and did not know whether he was welcome there. For a moment the house was almost peaceful. Children ate. The goat was tied outside. The dogs slept by the stove. The photograph on the mantel caught the last light. Then Lily spoke without lifting her head. My mama used to sing before supper. The room went still. Clara held the ladle over the pot. Then maybe we ought to leave that place empty until a song finds it. Lily looked up confused by kindness that did not try to steal anything. Before anyone could answer, hoofbeats sounded beyond the yard. Not many. One horse, maybe two. Ethan moved first. He set his hat down, crossed to the wall, and lifted the rifle from its pegs. Samuel stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Clara looked toward the window and saw a lantern bobbing near the outer fence. A woman's voice called from the dark suite as honey poured over a knife. Ethan, I brought something for your new bride. Clara did not need to see the face clearly to know it was Abigail Price. Ethan did not open the door right away. He stood with the rifle low in one hand, not pointed, not threatening, but present enough to make the room remember that kindness on the frontier still needed a lock and a barrel. Clara remained beside the stove, one hand resting near the pot, her heart beating hard under the tight seams of her wedding dress. The children had gone silent in the way children do when they know adults are about to say things sharper than knives. Outside, Abigail Price waited beneath the lantern light with a covered basket over one arm and a smile that belonged in town, not at a tired ranch house after dark. I thought it proper she called to welcome Mrs. Walker. Samuel muttered, ain't nothing proper about her. Ethan gave him one look and the boy shut his mouth. When Ethan opened the door, Abigail stepped inside as though she had been expected. She was dressed in blue silk that had no business near a muddy yard, her hair pinned clean beneath a small hat, her gloves pale and spotless. Her eyes moved over the room, over the laundry, the cracked chair, the flower still on Ben's ear, the silent boy under the table, the old photograph on the mantel, and finally Clara. There it was again, that measuring. Clara had felt it all her life, in church pews, in dress shops, at supper tables where relatives counted biscuits and watched her hand. Abigail looked at Clara as though a woman could be priced by the inch, the pound, and the usefulness of her womb. How brave of you, Abigail said. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. For what, Mrs. Price? For taking on so much. Abigail's smile did not change. Most new brides hope for a soft beginning. You have married into a widower's grief, a failing ranch, and more children than any one woman could sensibly manage. Ethan's jaw tightened. You brought something cake. Abigail lifted the basket. For the children. Ben leaned forward. Maggie did too. Samuel folded his arms. Clara saw at once what kind of cake it was: white sugar, fine flour, rich icing. The sort poor children remembered. The sort a woman brought when she wanted small mouths on her side. That was kind, Clara said. Abigail's eyes brightened not with warmth, but with victory. I do what I can. She set the cake on the table, then looked toward Lily. My dear, you remember I told you I still have your mamma's blue ribbon from the quilting circle. You should come by and fetch it. Some things ought to be kept with people who remember properly. Lily's fingers tightened around her spoon. Clara felt the words land. Not loud, not crude. Worse than that. Carefully placed. Ethan stepped forward. Lily has what she needs here. Abigail turned to him. Does she? For the first time, her voice lost a little honey. The house seemed to shrink around them. Abigail lowered her gaze to Clara's hands, still red from washing and stove heat. Forgive me. I only worry. A ranch like this requires a certain kind of woman. Stamina. Grace under pressure. A figure suited to hard work. And of course, in time, a man naturally wants... Enough, Ethan said. The word was quiet, but the dogs lifted their heads. Abigail paused. Then she smiled again, softer now, as though Ethan's warning had amused her. I meant no insult. Everyone in town only wants what is best for you and the children. No, Ethan said. Most folks want what makes them feel right. Clara looked at him then. He was not angry in the loud way men used to frighten a room. His anger was steadier than that. It stood between Abigail and the children like a closed gate. But Clara still felt herself shrinking. Because Abigail had not said anything Clara had not already feared. She had only dressed the fear in a pretty hat and brought it to supper. Abigail removed her gloves finger by finger. Reverend Cole is concerned, Ethan. Judge Harlan, too. There are questions about the children, about the new little ones you've taken in, about whether this home has proper supervision. Samuel shot to his feet. We're fine. Abigail looked at him gently. Are you Samuel? You've been raising half this house yourself. The boy's face flushed, and for one terrible second Clara saw how easily pride could be turned into a wound. Ethan put the rifle against the wall and moved between them. My family is not town business. When children are involved, everything becomes town business. There it was, the threat under the cake. Clara felt the room tilt. She had thought Abigail came to mock her. Now she understood Abigail had come to count weaknesses: a grieving daughter, a proud boy, a messy house, a widowed man and a new bride, the town already believed unfit. Ethan did not raise his voice. Who sent you? No one sends me where I care to go. Abigail covered the cake again as if taking back sweetness she had never meant to give. But Judge Harlan may visit soon. He will want to see whether the children are being properly kept, especially that little church boy. Under the table, Tommy pulled his wooden horse tight against his chest. Clara saw him. So did Ethan. Before Ethan could answer, Clara stepped forward. Her legs felt heavy. Her throat felt worse. Every cruel word from the church still clung to her skin. But Tommy's eyes were wide in the shadows, and Lily's face had gone pale, and Ben's flour-dusted smile had disappeared. You may tell Judge Harlan, Clara said that the children ate supper tonight. Abigail turned slowly. Clara kept her hands folded so no one would see them shake. You may tell him Lily's portion had the soft bacon because she looked tired. You may tell him Ben washed most of the flour off. You may tell him Tommy took bread from under the table when he was ready and not before. And you may tell him Samuel is angry because he has been carrying too much for a boy. Samuel stared at her. Abigail's face hardened by one small degree. That sounds touching, Mrs. Walker. But feeding children one evening, does not make a woman fit. No, Clara said. Staying does. The room went so quiet that the stove crackle sounded like breaking sticks. Ethan looked at Clara, and something in his expression changed, not surprise exactly, but recognition, as though he had known she was strong and had only just seen where that strength lived. Abigail picked up her basket. At least you understand what is at stake, she said. If this home fails inspection, the children may be placed where proper people can raise them. Lily made a small sound. Ethan's hand closed into a fist. Step off my porch, Abigail. She looked at him, then at Clara. Winter has a way of revealing what a household is made of. Then she left her skirt whispering through the doorway, her lantern swinging back toward the road. Ethan barred the door after her. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Tommy crawled out from under the table, crossed the room on small bare feet, and placed the broken wooden horse beside Clara's shoe. He did not speak. He simply left it there, like a question he was too frightened to ask. Clara bent with effort, picked it up and set it carefully on the table. I can mend that, she said. Tommy watched her with solemn eyes. Samuel looked away fast, but not before Clara saw his face change. Outside, the lantern disappeared beyond the fence. Yet the danger did not leave with it. It had only put on a cleaner dress and promised to come back with a judge. That night, long after the children had been settled, Clara found a loose floorboard near the kitchen stove while searching for a needle strong enough to fix the horse. Beneath it lay a folded paper wrapped in oilcloth, yellowed at the edges and tied with a black ribbon. She should have called Ethan. Instead, she unfolded just enough to see the county seal, his late wife's name, and one line written in a careful hand. If I die, do not let Harlan decide where my children go. Clara stood in the kitchen with the oilcloth paper trembling in her hands while the house slept around her. The stove had burned low. The dogs breathed heavy near the door. Somewhere upstairs, Ben turned in his dreams and mumbled about the goat. Yet Clara could not move her eyes from the line written in Ethan's late wife's hand. If I die, do not let Harlan decide where my children go. She read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might change if she looked long enough. They did not. Beneath that line was a signed statement naming Ethan Walker as sole guardian of every child already under his roof, and any abandoned child he chose to shelter, so long as the ranch remained a safe home. At the bottom sat a witness marked from Reverend Cole, faded but plain. Clara understood only part of it, but she understood enough. Judge Harlan had no clean claim over those children unless someone could make the Walker Ranch look unfit, and Abigail Price had come to do exactly that. Clara folded the paper back with care and took it to Ethan. He was not asleep. He sat on the edge of his bed in the small room off the hall boots, still on elbows, on his knees, looking like a man who had been listening to trouble walk around his house all night. When Clara handed him the oilcloth, Ethan's face changed before he even opened it. Where did you find this? Under the loose board by the stove. He looked down at the black ribbon and swallowed once. Mary hid things when she was afraid. Clara's voice softened. She was afraid of Harlan. She was afraid of any man who thought children belonged to paper more than to love. Ethan unfolded the statement and touched his wife's name with one rough thumb. Harlan wanted Samuel sent to an uncle back east after she died. Said I was too grief-struck to raise him. Then Lily, then Ben. Every time I took in another child, he said the same. Why Ethan lifted his eyes. Because a divided family is easy to control. A ranch without children on it is easier to sell. The answer settled in Clara's stomach like a stone. By morning, Judge Harlan arrived with Reverend Cole Abigail Price and 2 men from town who wore good coats and carried themselves as though decency were something stitched into wool. They found Clara at the wash line with Tommy beside her, teaching him how to pin small socks without pricking his fingers. Samuel was mending fence with Ethan. Maggie fed chickens from a dented tin cup. Lily sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl pale from the chill she had not yet taken but would soon. Ben was chasing the lame dog in circles, both of them delighted by nothing at all. For one breath, the ranch looked almost happy. Then the judge stepped through the gate. Harlan was a narrow man with a silver watch chain, a clean beard, and eyes that never rested on children unless counting them. He removed his hat to Abigail before he nodded to Ethan's wife. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "we have come to see whether this household is suitable." Clara wanted to hide behind the sheets. Her body felt too large and too exposed in the open yard. She could feel Abigail's gaze moving over her apron, her thick arms, her flushed face, her slow steps. All the old shame rose up begging her to make herself smaller. But Tommy's small hand closed around her skirt. So Clara stood where she was. "You are welcome to see the children have food, clothes, beds, and chores suited to their age," she said. Abigail smiled. "How official you sound after one night." Ethan's voice came from near the fence. "She sounds like the woman of this house." Samuel looked at him sharply, then at Clara. Judge Harlan began his inspection as though he had already written the ending. He lifted blankets, checked the pantry, asked Lily whether she missed her mother, asked Samuel whether he felt burdened, asked Ben if he was ever hungry. Each question was wrapped in concern and tied with rope. Lily shrank into herself. Samuel answered like a slammed door. Ben said, "I'm hungry right now," which made Abigail's eyes flash with triumph until Maggie added, "He's always hungry." He ate 3 cakes once and bit the 4th. For a moment, even Reverend Cole's mouth twitched. Then the trouble came. A shout rose from the barn. One of the younger calves had forced through a weak rail and spooked the milk cow. The cow kicked over a bucket. The goat broke loose, the lame dog barked, and Ben, eager to help, when no one had asked him, ran straight toward the open side gate. "Ben, Clara," cried. The boy vanished beyond the wash line. Samuel dropped his tools and bolted. Ethan went after him. The judge shouted for order, though no living thing obeyed him. Abigail grabbed Lily's arm and pulled her back so sharply the girl cried out. That cry changed Clara. She did not run fast. She could not. But she moved with a force that made everyone else look frantic. She took Lily from Abigail's grip, put her on the porch and said, "Hold Tommy's hand. Do not let go." Then Clara turned to Maggie. "Shut the hen gate." To Samuel, who was racing back wild-eyed, "Check the dry creek. Ben likes hiding low." To Ethan, the calves caught by the east rail. "Cut him loose before he breaks his leg." Ethan stared one heartbeat, then obeyed. Clara lifted her skirts and went toward the smokehouse because she had learned something about Ben in one evening. Noisy children often hid near food when frightened. She found him wedged behind the flour barrel, crying without sound, his hands over his ears. She knelt slowly, breathing hard. "Ben," she said, "the house is loud, but you are not in trouble." He shook his head. "The cow is loud. The goat is foolish. The judge is bossy. None of that is your fault." A hiccup escaped him. Clara reached out but stopped before touching him. "May I carry you?" Ben stared at her wide arms, then nodded. Getting up with him took effort. Her knees screamed. Her back pulled. Abigail watched from the yard with something like disgust. But Ben wrapped both arms around Clara's neck and buried his face in her shoulder as if she were the only safe place left in the world. By the time Clara returned, Ethan had freed the calf, Samuel had barred the side gate, Maggie had shut in the chickens, and Lily stood on the porch, still holding Tommy's hand. The ranch was messy, muddy, loud, imperfect, but every child was safe. Judge Harlan looked annoyed, which told Clara he had hoped for something worse. "This household appears disorderly," he said. Clara adjusted Ben on her hip. "Children are disorderly when they are alive." Abigail's cheeks coloured. "And what happens when you cannot keep up? What happens when your size, your health, your condition prevent you from protecting them?" The yard went silent. There it was spoken plainly at last. Not concern, not law, not virtue, just the old cruelty wearing a town lady's dress. Clara felt the wound open inside her. For a moment she was back in every room where someone had told her she was too much body and not enough woman. Her arms tightened around Ben. Then Samuel stepped forward. "She found him," he said. Abigail turned. "Samuel." "Dear, you need not defend." "She found him," Samuel repeated louder. "You grabbed Lily hard enough to hurt her." Judge yelled. Reverend stood there. "I ran wrong." Pa was at the calf. Clara found Ben. Ethan looked at his son as if the boy had just crossed a river alone. Judge Harlan's lips thinned. "A boy's excitement is not testimony." "No," Ethan said, stepping beside Clara. "But my wife's care is evidence enough for this yard." Harlan reached into his coat. "That remains to be seen. A formal petition can be filed. Until review, the abandoned child may be removed to church custody." The words struck harder than any insult. From inside the house, the newborn began to cry. Clara turned toward the sound before anyone else did. That alone seemed to anger Abigail. "You see," Abigail said, "one woman cannot manage all this." Clara handed Ben to Samuel and went inside. The baby lay in a basket near the stove, red-faced and furious at the world. Clara lifted her warmed the milk, tested it against her wrist and held the child close. The tiny mouth found the cloth nipple and pulled. Once. Then again. The crying eased. When Clara came back to the porch, the baby was quiet against her breast. Reverend Cole stared down at the child, and something troubled passed across his face. Perhaps he remembered the night Tommy had been left at his own church door. Perhaps he remembered signing Mary Walker's paper and staying silent afterward. Fear can make cowards of decent men, but shame keeps account. Clara looked at him. "Reverend, did you witness Mary Walker's statement?" Harlan's head snapped toward him. Abigail went still. The Reverend's face drained. "I did." Judge Harlan's voice turned cold. "Careful, Cole." For a moment, the preacher's eyes dropped to the dirt. His hands tightened around the Bible he carried. He looked like a man standing at the edge of a bridge he had avoided for years. Then Lily spoke from the porch. "My mama said Pa kept children because he knew what lonesome felt like." Reverend Cole closed his eyes. When he opened them, his voice was quiet but clear. Mary Walker signed a guardianship statement before she died. She feared the court might separate her children. "I witnessed it." Ethan stepped inside and returned with the oilcloth paper. Judge Harlan reached for it. Ethan did not give it to him. He handed it to Reverend Cole. The preacher unfolded it, read the marks and nodded. "This is her hand. And mine." For the first time all morning, Harlan looked less like a judge and more like a man caught too close to his own shadow. Abigail recovered first. A dead woman's fear does not prove this one fit. "No," Clara said. She came down one porch step with the baby asleep against her and every child watching. "But neither does my empty womb prove me unfit. Neither does my dress size. Neither does your opinion of my face, my body, or my worth. You asked whether I can give Ethan children. I cannot. But I can feed the children who are hungry. I can sit up when fever comes. I can mend a broken horse. I can remember which child hides under tables, and which one protects too hard. I can make room for a baby nobody else wanted to carry. Her voice shook, but it did not break. And I can stay. No one moved. Then Samuel stepped beside her, not close enough to lean, close enough to be seen. She stays, he said. Maggie joined him. Then Ben. Lily came last, holding Tommy's hand. The little boy looked up at Clara, then at the baby, and placed his wooden horse on the porch step beside her foot. Reverend Cole turned to Judge Harlan. There will be no removal today. Harlan's eyes narrowed. That is not your decision. No, Ethan said. But the town heard enough to know what yours is worth. The men in good coats looked at one another. Neither stepped forward. Abigail's face had gone pale with a rage too polished to show its teeth. You think this ends here? She asked Clara. Clara looked down at the children gathered around her, at Ethan standing beside them, at the baby breathing warm through the blanket, and for the first time in many years, she did not lower her head. No, she said softly. I think it begins here. Judge Harlan left with his papers unfiled that day, but not beaten. Abigail followed him to the gate, whispering low and fast. Clara could not hear every word, but she heard enough. Courthouse. Petition. Public hearing. Ethan heard it too. By sundown, a notice was nailed to the mercantile door. The Walker household would be reviewed before the county bench in 3 days, and the fitness of Clara Whitmore Walker would be questioned before any soul in town who cared to listen. That night, Lily came to Clara's door with the framed photograph of her mother held against her chest. Clara expected accusation. Instead, Lily whispered, "Can she stay on the mantel?" Clara's throat tightened. "Always." Lily nodded, then added so softly Clara nearly missed it, "You can stand beside her." Outside, the prairie wind pushed dust against the house. Inside, Clara sat awake with a needle, a broken wooden horse, and a baby sleeping near her feet, knowing that in 3 days, the whole town would decide whether a woman like her had the right to be called mother. 3 days later, the courthouse was so full that men stood along the back wall with their hats in their hands, and women crowded near the windows, pretending they had only come for justice. Clara sat beside Ethan on the front bench with the baby asleep in her arms. Her brown dress had been brushed clean, but it was still plain. Her hands were chapped from lye soap and stove heat. Her body filled the space it occupied, and for once she did not fold herself inward to make the town more comfortable. Samuel sat on her left. Lily held the framed photograph of Mary Walker in her lap. Ben kept one hand on Clara's skirt, as if he feared someone might drag her away. Maggie watched Abigail Price with open dislike. Tommy held the mended wooden horse against his chest, its broken leg now wrapped tight with thread and glue. Judge Harlan took the bench, though every face in the room knew he should not have. He spoke of order. He spoke of standards. He spoke of the welfare of children in a voice polished smooth by years of hearing himself believed. Then Abigail stood. She did not shout. She did not need to. Her cruelty always came dressed for church. A household full of motherless children requires a woman of sound body, steady nerves, and proper example, she said. Mrs. Walker may mean well, but meaning well does not make a mother. Clara felt the words strike, but they did not knock her down. For one breath, fear still lived in her. Not fear of Abigail, not even fear of Harlan. It was the old fear, the one planted deepest, that maybe the town was right, that her love would always be counted as less because her body had never carried a child. Then Tommy climbed down from the bench. The little boy, who almost never spoke, walked across the courthouse floor with every eye upon him. Reverend Cole reached as if to stop him, then thought better of it. Tommy went straight to Clara and set the wooden horse on the rail before the judge. She fixed him, he said. It was barely more than a whisper. A few people leaned forward. Tommy looked at Harlan with solemn eyes. She asked first before she picked me up. The courthouse went still in a different way then. Not silent from shock. Silent from shame. Samuel stood next. His voice shook with anger, but he forced it steady. She don't try to take our Ma's place. She keeps it safe. She feeds us before herself. She found Ben when all of you were busy judging. She stayed when I was mean enough to make most folks leave. Ben lifted his hand. She knows I hide by flower. A small laugh moved through the room, gentle and human. Lily rose last, clutching her mother's photograph. My mama told Pa to keep us together, she said. Clara does that. Reverend Cole stepped forward, holding Mary Walker's statement in both hands. I witnessed this paper, he said, and I failed this family by keeping quiet when powerful people wanted those children divided. Mary Walker named Ethan guardian. She trusted his mercy, and from what I have seen, Clara Walker has strengthened that mercy, not weakened it. Judge Harlan's face hardened. This court will decide what is proper. No, a voice called from the back. It was the blacksmith, a man who had never wasted a word in town. What's proper is children fed, sheltered and loved. A widow near the window nodded. And nobody ever asked Abigail Price whether her hands knew how to cool a fever. Abigail turned red. This is sentimental foolishness. Ethan stood then. He did not make a speech for the papers. He did not decorate the truth. I married Clara because I needed someone who would not run when the house got loud, he said. But I love her because she stayed when every soul in this town gave her reason not to. Clara looked up at him and the room blurred. Ethan turned toward Harlan. You can question my fence, my roof, my debts, and my temper, but you will not question whether my wife is the heart of my family. For the first time, Harlan had no clean sentence ready. The county clerk, pale and nervous, rose from a side desk. Judge, there is no filing record for removal, no formal complaint except the petition Mrs. Price brought. And given Reverend Cole's statement, Mary Walker's paper stands. Harlan stared at him. The clerk swallowed. That is the law as written. The law he had tried to bend had finally stood straight. Harlan struck the bench once and dismissed the petition without looking at Clara. Abigail left before the room emptied her fine dress, brushing past muddy boots that no longer stepped aside for her. Justice did not arrive like thunder. It came like a door unlatched from the inside. That winter was still hard. The baby cried through cold nights. Ben still startled when voices rose. Tommy still asked before climbing into Clara's lap. Samuel still checked the road after dark, and Lily still touched her mother's photograph each morning as if making sure love could remain without being replaced. But fear began to lose its claim. Clara learned the rhythm of the ranch. Ethan learned to laugh before supper. Samuel began leaving split kindling by the stove without being asked. Lily let Clara braid her hair always beneath the photograph on the mantel. Ben crawled into Clara's arms one stormy night and fell asleep there as if he had been waiting 6 years to rest. Tommy placed his wooden horse beside the baby's basket, standing guard. And one spring morning, when Clara was kneading bread with flour up to her wrists, Lily came in carrying a torn dress. Ma, she said then, froze. The whole kitchen stopped. Clara did not rush toward the word. She did not grab it too tightly. She only looked at the child and smiled through tears she refused to waste by hiding. Yes, sweetheart. Lily held out the dress. Can you mend this? Clara took it as if it were something sacred. I can. Years passed and the Walker Ranch grew louder. More children came. Some stayed a week. Some stayed forever. A barn cat with one eye ruled the feed room. The lame dog grew grey by the stove, the porch filled with boots of every size. Folks who had once mocked Clara began sending hungry children to her door when sickness, death, or shame left them nowhere else to go. She remained a large woman. She remained unable to bear children. But she no longer walked as though apologizing for the space she filled. Ethan used to joke that his whole herd had doubled. Clara would look over the long table at the children, passing bread, arguing softly, laughing too loud, growing strong under a roof that did not measure them by blood, and she would answer, "Good." A mother's heart was never meant to be small. Many years later, the old church door in town still bore the scar from the day it slammed open on Clara's wedding morning. Folks told that story whenever a frightened woman believed she had nothing worth offering. They told how Clara Whitmore stood before a cowboy and confessed she could not give him children, and how Ethan Walker, wiser than the whole town, looked at a woman everyone had called useless and saw the mother his herd had been waiting for. If this story reminded you that family is not always born but often chosen and kept, write, "A mother's heart has room" in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe for more frontier stories where kindness still stands when the world turns cold.